Good afternoon, everybody. What I am going to talk about today is very briefly how to use color temperature in your lighting. This comes from a comment left by Heriberto on my previous video. Thank you very much, Heriberto, for your tip. So what is color temperature? Well, in my previous video, what I did was I took a single infinite light, which represented sunlight, and then I changed the color using the color node to a color that I know to be similar to daylight. So color temperature is the way that the intensity of light is described in Kelvin, and Kelvin is an absolute temperature scale that starts from absolute zero, and that's 0 Kelvin, and then it goes all the way up to infinity theoretically. So the temperature of the sun, for example, might be 10 million Kelvin, 15 million Kelvin, depending where you measure it. And ordinary light falls somewhere between about 1,000 and maybe 15,000 Kelvin. So you might see light with a description something like 6,500 K. That's how you would write Kelvin. And what that enables you to do is to describe the light of particular conditions, an overcast day, candlelight, tungsten light, sodium light, in terms of their Kelvin, so that you get very accurate light physics in whatever application you're doing. Photographers are used to thinking in terms of color temperature, and in 3D it's even more important. When you're taking photos, you'll often go to a venue where, say, they'll have sports lights up, sodium lights up on the top, and you may not notice that they're casting a very blue temperature, which would be a relatively high color temperature. What you do is use your white balance on your camera to counteract that and try and bring the colors back to neutral. And the thing that color temperature does is, if you imagine a scene such as this one, so we've got a man and a woman in a whatever countryside scene. If it was the sun was very low, there would be a more yellow or orange hue cast on this scene. And if the sun was very bright and high in the sky, essentially white the sun is, then you'd get a much whiter or even bluer hue cast on the scene. And your perception of every color in the scene is changed by the color of the light shining on it. But when you're in an actual venue or out in the world, if you go out and stand outside your window, you're probably not aware of the color hue shining on the scene. So it's useful to have some absolute values. So in the past, what I've done is I've worked off this chart, and this chart shows just some basic color temperatures described in terms of their RGB values, which you can see here. And what that enables me to do is to plug in a number to here and then do the RGB, which is what I did when I did the previous video. However, a more physically useful and accurate way is to describe the colors in terms of their Kelvin value. And this is the great tip that Heriberto gave me, thanks again, is that if we go into the material room here, and then we've got the color here, which is white by default. But if I do new node, cycles, converter, black body, and then plug that black body into here, and you'll see the black body has a Kelvin value color temperature. And what a black body is all light is emitted as radiation, I guess you'd say. And a black body is a theoretical object which emits light perfectly according to the temperature of the object. And so 1500 here, for example, if I render that scene at 1500 Kelvin, it's going to be a very, very low orange, just slightly above a candle. If I take that up to something like 6,500, that's going to be something like daylight. And you can see that everything in the scene is infused with that. There you go, quite a nice natural light. So everything in the scene is is infused and reflected with that color temperature. So it's just a very useful way if you want to match your colors. Here you can see a little diagram I did where you go from white and then which is the default poser without any black body plugged into it, and then from 10,000 down to 1500K. And what I find is that once you get above 10,000, you increments of 1,000 or 1,500 don't really make a lot of difference on this color on an actual scene. It works fine here where I've got chrome and stainless steel, but in an actual scene it doesn't really show up as a great deal of difference. So although as you go really high it tends towards blue. So rather than having to type in values here, you could use this chart which now shows you the Kelvin value. And there are charts which go even further. Thank you for Snap Photos for this chart. And you can go from candlelight for your dungeon scenes all the way up to, you know, way beyond this, 15,000 or whatever. This is not very accurate. It's more symbolic that you know, the 6,000 is not that blue. These the rest are fairly accurate, but it's not really showing a very accurate gradation. But what it enables you to do is to, without trying to eyeball it here and trying to work out, okay, which shade of orange is going to give me a nice candlelight using the preview, blah, 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 you can now do a very accurate Kelvin value, which pertains to known render values, known lighting Kelvin values in the real world. So again, thank you, Heriberto. One more little thing before I disappear. The intensity value here, which is also included in the light here, you could think of that as the amount of a light. So you know, like you think of a torch in terms of its wattage or a light bulb in terms of its wattage, but just be mindful, because as you increase the intensity, the color tends towards white. So at 100% intensity, it's the true Kelvin value, and then as you go up, I'm going to guess, I'm not an expert in this physics, but I'm going to guess that as you go up the values here, then you're actually affecting the Kelvin value. So hope that helps, guys, and I will speak to you again soon.